I am extremely pleased to and very excited to introduce our first speaker of the evening, Professor Kotlikoff, who received his BA in economics from the University of Pennsylvania and his PhD from a little-known institution across the river that I need not mention. He is a William Fairfield Warren Professor of Economics. He is also a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, a Fellow of the Econometric Society, a Research Associate of the National Bureau of Economic Research, President of Economic Security Planning Incorporated, and the Director of the Tax Analysis Center. And that's only a smidge of his long vita, so I highly recommend you to check that out sometime. So without further ado, Professor Kotlikoff.
Thanks so much. It's a great pleasure to be here. I love BU. I've been here since 1984, and I think of BU as bootstrap university. It's building its way up to a fabulous university, and I'm delighted to have spent all this time here at BU and to be talking to you tonight about a very critical problem that the country faces, which is that it's broke. And I want to ask how many of you agree with me right off the bat. And I don't mean just broke. I mean more broke than Detroit was when it went bankrupt, more broke than Lehman Brothers when it went bankrupt, more broke possibly even than Greece is today. How many agree with me? How many put your hands up if you agree with me, and feel free not to agree with me. Okay, so that's good. We only had 3 people out of maybe 150 people who agreed. So if you think about Greece's debt to GDP ratio, it's about 175%. So it's almost 2 years of GDP. It would take 2 years of making things in Greece and selling things in Greece and not spending any of that and just using that to pay off the Greek debt. Pretty much that's what's required. In the U.S., the U.S. Official debt to GDP ratio is closer to about 70%. So on that basis, we look much better shape than Greece. So why could I say that Greece might actually be in better fiscal shape than the U.S.? Well, one reason is that a lot of the debt that Greece has is not actually what's called mark-to-market. It's carried at book, so it's actually overstating the true degree to which Greece owes money on a formal basis. Its official debt is probably about the same size as ours relative to GDP. It's about 70% of GDP if you measure it properly. But that's not the real reason I think that the U.S. might be in similar fiscal straits as Greece. It's because of the debts that are not put on the books. Now, I'm going to give you some examples of those debts. I'm 64. In a year from now, I could start collecting, if I were going to retire. I'm not going to retire, probably till I'm 98 or something. But I enjoy what I'm doing too much. This is not a job. It's just fun. It's just a deep pleasure. But when I do start collecting Social Security, and I have to start collecting Social Security benefits at 70, and at some point I'll be collecting Medicare benefits, well, those benefits together will total about $30,000 a year for me. Actually, it'll be more about $45,000 a year coming to me either in the form of a monthly check or in bills that the government's paying for me to doctors and hospitals through time. So on average, people in my generation are going to receive from Medicare and Medicaid, which is old age health care for people that are in nursing homes. There's also Medicaid for people that are very poor who are younger, but 70% of Medicaid is actually spent on the elderly. And then there's Medicare, which is basic health insurance for the elderly. So these 3 programs, the payments to my generation will average, in today's dollars, about $40,000 per person. So all the people that have gray hair in this room are going to be getting benefits from the government. And there's an army of members of something called the American Association of Retired People, which is the AARP. It's the largest lobby group in the country, which is there to defend those benefits, to make sure that in the political process, those benefits get paid off. That lobby group has 50 million members, from what I understand. Everybody over 50 is encouraged to enroll because they're all on the side of the kind of age divide where they have more to gain from keeping these programs in place than to gain from having them reformed. Now, the obligation to pay me these funds, either in kind or in cash, in the form of checks, monthly checks, is not on the books. Neither is the obligations to pay for government defense. Do you think we'll ever not have a defense department, never have a military, never have jet planes or drones or a navy? No. So there's nothing on the books that incorporates all those obligations to pay government defense spending expenditures, nor is there anything on the books to pay for the president's lunch. That's an obligation. The president has to eat every day. And we also have to gas up Air Force One every day. Through time, there are projections from the Congressional Budget Office of all those expenditures, including for the president's lunch, including for gassing up Air Force One, including for paying for repairing the highways like Route 95 out here, or 495. These are federal roads that have to be paid in part by the federal government. So those all represent obligations, and also obligations to pay for my benefits and for welfare benefits and for food stamps for poor people. So those are all the expenditure commitments the government has to make through time, and they're projected out into the future. But the government also has taxes that are projected to be collected to cover those expenditures. So to an economist, what we're going to look at is not just the expenditures to service the official debt, which is only about $13 trillion, the debt that's in the hands of the public. And our GDP is around 18 trillion, so that's where you get the 70% ratio. So that paying off the principal and interest on those official government bonds is one part of the commitment the government has to make, some part of the expenditure path, but it's only a small part of it. All these other expenditures are much larger. They have a much larger value in the present. So if you look at all the expenditures and you value them today, and you say, how much would it cost to pay them off, net of all the taxes we're projected to collect? Well, the answer is we're short $199 trillion. We're not short $13 trillion. We're short $199 trillion. And that's under relatively optimistic projections by the Congressional Budget Office. Now, why is it that when you put everything on the books, the way economists think it needs to be done, and when I say economists think it needs to be done, there's a website called theinformact.org, which has been endorsed by over 1,200 economists, including over 17 Nobel Prize winners, who have endorsed this kind of accounting. It's called Fiscal Gap Accounting. It says, let's look at everything that we're going to have to pay through time, through my life, through your kid's life, out through time, but discount it, make less of it. That's what discounting means. If it's way out in the future, we value it in the present at a smaller number because it's out in the future, so we make less of it, we discount it. Discount all the future expenditures, discount all the future taxes, and look at the difference. And that's the measure of the country's insolvency. Now, that turns out to be 58%. That 199 trillion is 58% of the present value of all the taxes we're going to be collecting as projected by the Congressional Budget Office. In other words, our country, our government, is underfunded to the tune of 58%. Detroit was about 20% underfunded when it declared bankruptcy. The fiscal gap in Greece as a share of its tax revenue, I doubt it's that large. It may be that large or larger, but in any case, on this measure, which is what economists think needs to be measured, the country is bankrupt. It's not bankrupt 20 years from now or 30 years or 40 years from now. It's bankrupt today because this is a present value. This is what we owe today. If we don't deal with this obligation, it's like a credit card bill. It will be bigger next year because it will grow with interest. Now, why is it that we have an official debt that's 13 trillion and a true debt that's 199 trillion? Why is it, how is it that the government could get by keeping so much stuff off the books, all these obligations off the books? And these are net obligations. Well, it's very simple. It has to do with language. If I come to Dennis and I'm Uncle Sam and I take some money from you, Dennis, you're young, you're about 35, correct? 40. He's 40. And I give it to, let me find somebody who's a little bit older. I'm going to pretend that, let's see. Wayne, you're a little bit older. How old are you?
60.
Okay, so if I take some money from some young people and give it to some old people, and I start doing this in spades and building up ever more every year, starting in the 1950s under Eisenhower, because every administration has done this. I have a couple options here with respect to language. I could say that I'm borrowing the money from you. It's Daryl. It's not Wayne. It's Daryl. Not Dennis. I said Dennis. It's Daryl. So I couldn't see your name badge. I take money from you now, and I could call it borrowing, and then I could give it to Wayne as a transfer payment. Can call it a transfer payment. And then that borrowing would show up in the books. It would be added as part of the 13 trillion next year, would show up as part of our outstanding debt. And I could, at the same time, when I borrow from you officially, I would say, look, Daryl, when you're older, I'm going to pay back that borrowing with interest. And I could even claim to be paying you a very high interest. But what if I don't use those words? What if I come and take the same amount of money from you and I say, Daryl, I'm actually taxing you. I'm not borrowing from you. And but don't worry about it because, yes, I'm giving the money to Wayne, but when you're older, I'm going to give you that money back plus a whole lot more, and I'm going to call that a transfer payment. So I'm going to, in effect, pay back what I take from you now with interest, and might even give you even something beyond that, but I'm going to use this language, taxation and transfer payments, because I don't want to put this obligation that I'm making to you right now on the books. Because if I do, I'm going to look like a spendthrift. And I'm Uncle Sam. I'm running the country. I don't want to. I'm President Eisenhower. I'm President Johnson. I'm President Kennedy. Whatever. All the presidents in the post-war period have been engaged in this take-as-you-go policy of taking from young people, giving to old people, calling it taxes, calling the payments transfer payments, saying they're going to pay back in the form of transfer payments. And guess what? When you're old, they come to the next set of young people and say, gee, I need to tax you a lot, but don't worry about that. Don't worry about the fact that I'm calling it taxes because you're going to get it back because you're going to be able to expropriate your kids. And this is the mechanism by which the government has kept almost all of our true economic fiscal debt off the books, just very simply by using the choice of words. So what I'm saying here is that the deficit and the debt, the amount the government is officially borrowing, is not a well-defined economic concept. Just like in physics, we have equations in physics, as Einstein taught us, that teach us that time and distance are not well-defined measures. They depend on your frame of reference, how you're traveling through space, in what direction and what speed. That's in effect, your language, and that determines how you report time and distance right now, right here. The same thing in economics. What language we associate, what words we associate with the receipts the government has taken in the past from the private sector and given to other people, what payments it's made, what words it's used in this process will determine what gets put on the books as official debt. But that doesn't mean that that's actually measuring anything. So anyone who uses the word government debt, government deficit, and it's being used all the time, or also the size of taxes, the size of transfers, payments, the cash flows of the governments, these are all fundamentally meaningless concepts, just like at some very deep level, time and distance are not well-defined concepts. I can't say for sure what time it is right now. There are a zillion different measures of what time it is. There's a zillion different measures of what the deficit is and what the debt is right now in the U.S. For both the U.S. and Greece, there's only one measure that's language-free when it comes to economic theory. That's the fiscal gap. When it comes to measuring a country's insolvency, that's the fiscal gap. And on that basis, we're $199 trillion in the hole. We need to raise everybody's taxes, every single federal tax, immediately and permanently by 58% starting today. Or if we don't do that, it's going to be a higher increase in the future. And that's what the adults in this country have planned for you young people. Massive tax hikes that you will not get paid back in the form of transfer payments because the country is entirely, thoroughly broke. Thank you. I believe I have time for I believe I have time for 2 questions, which I will use to try and cheer you up. Yes.
Sorry, I got a mic now. Is what you described with the transfer payments, is this unique to the United States, or is this something that's seen in other countries around the globe?
Every country around every developed country has a fiscal gap that's very large compared to their official debt. But if you look at the U.S., our fiscal gap, or an unofficial fiscal gap, is about 10% of GDP. In Luxembourg, it's 12% of GDP. In France, it's about 5% of GDP. Japan, it might be about 8-9% of GDP. Germany, it's about 3% of GDP. Italy, which has a very high official debt to GDP ratio, on a fiscal gap basis, it's actually got a negative fiscal gap. It's about negative 2% of GDP. So our picture of which countries are in fiscal trouble and which are not is completely turned around by actually looking at the right numbers, the way economics and economists say to do it.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Hi, over here. I'm wondering what over here. Okay. What is it about the U.S.? Are we unique in this, or do other countries, like, what is it about the way that we choose to fund things that gives us more debt than other countries?
Well, we've just played this game started early on and have been ratcheting it up, administration after administration. For example, the Clinton administration is touted as having run a budget surplus during its first couple terms, at least the second term. But in the first 4 years of the Clinton administration, Medicare benefits per person grew by 25%. So this enormous increase in the Medicare unfunded liability grew and it was never put on the books. So the other countries have their health care systems under much better control in terms of the expenditures. We're now spending at the federal level and state level 10% of GDP. And in total in the country, about 18% of GDP on health care. The other countries have state-run health care systems. Whether they're providing better or worse quality is another question, and whether that's the best way to redesign the system is another question. But they have absolute control over their expenditures on health care. And if you look at a country like Switzerland or Germany, their health care expenditures as a share of GDP, their total expenditures are only 11% of GDP. We have the federal government spending 10% of GDP on our healthcare system, and it's not even giving basic health care to the entire population, basic health insurance to the entire population. So a large part of this is health expenditures out of control, but also Social Security. It has to do with the aging of our society. We have about 40 million elderly right now. There's about 75 million baby boomers. 10,000 are retiring every day. They're all going to get these huge checks. Somebody has to pay for them. The government has made no preparation for that. That's why we're so broke. Hey, time for any more? One last question. We have a question right here.
Hi. So we've discussed the problem, which is that the U.S. is in serious debt. But what do you think would be a solution? Not one solution, but what policies could we adopt to ameliorate the situation?
Well, I have a website called thepurpleplans.org. Purple is the combination of red and blue. And we have these politicians here who are either red or blue, it appears. Back in, if you go back to Justinian's Rome, which was in Constantinople back around 400 AD, they had the blues and the greens. So it seems like there's always two sides fighting and not getting to the essence of the problems and not fixing them. So if you go to thepurpleplans.org, you'll see a postcard-length solution for how to fix the healthcare system, such that everybody in the country gets a basic health insurance plan, but we don't go broke in the process. That's a plan that was endorsed by a number of Nobel Prize winners. There's also a Social Security reform proposal. That's, again, a postcard-length, just about 10 provisions. Our current system is a bureaucratic minefield. It's got hundreds of thousands of rules that nobody can follow. People are getting the wrong benefits and unfair treatment all the time. There's a plan for how to fix Wall Street for good. Dodd-Frank was just a cover-up, really. And one of the authors of that told me that personally. That was Barney Frank. Dodd-Frank? Barney Frank told me it was a stopgap measure. He would prefer to enact the Purple Financial Plan, which is up on that website. This is from Barney Frank. That plan has been endorsed by, again, a number of very notable economists, including a former Secretary of Treasury, George Shultz, and many Nobel Prize winners. There's a plan for fixing taxes. So, and also a plan for a carbon tax. We need to save the environment for you kids, for you younger people. In my view, the country has been and is at war with our children. It's time that Congress officially declare war. It's not just the fiscal liabilities we're leaving to you people. It's the poor education we've been providing Americans in general before they came to BU at the elementary and secondary level. It's the climate problems. It's the job market with the serious, where we have these top CEOs absolutely gleeful about the prospect of putting people out of jobs by introducing robots, smart machines to drive the trucks, drive the taxis, drive the cars, drive the delivery, the airplanes, and with no, or check us out at the counter, check us out through the toll booths, with no real thought about who's going to be able to buy the products that these smart machines produce if everybody's been put out of work. So I see this as a war on our children, on this generation. I think the Purple Plans would get rid of the fiscal gap and move the country in the right direction. And I hope that you'll vote for me for president. Thank you.